So, Mr. Jackson, if I had realized that you only had a couple of questions left,
unmuted.
we would not have taken the break when we did. So,
May I proceed?
please.
Thank you. Mr. Albert, I want to address a couple of quick things that we talked about a little bit earlier. The September 22nd, 2022 date, recall that date?
Yes.
That's the date that you indicate that you believe you got rid of your phone or turned your phone in for an upgrade.
Yes.
Did you watch the proceedings that on this case, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed, on September 22nd, 2022?
No.
You were not aware that that was the first date that I appeared on this case when it was nationally televised?
Objection.
Sustained.
Were you aware that hearing date of September 22nd, 2022 was a televised hearing?
Objection.
Sustained.
What did you know about the hearing date of September 22nd, 2022?
I didn't know anything about it.
Knew nothing about it?
No.
Okay. Let me ask you a different question. This is going to dovetail into an earlier conversation you and I had concerning a statement that you gave to in June of 2023 to the other hearing. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
I'm fumbling the language a little bit, but you understand the hearing that I'm talking about.
Yes.
You had indicated a little bit earlier in my questioning that you did not recall saying something to the effect of, yeah, it's only possible that it was me who answered the phone. You remember saying that? That you didn't recall that?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Albert, there's a highlighted portion of that transcript. If you just take a look at that when you finish reviewing it, just look up at me and let me know.
Yes, I get it.
May I approach, Your Honor? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Albert, did that refresh your recollection as to the colloquy that you had with someone questioning you about this issue in June of 2023?
Yes.
And in fact, you testified as follows. Question, can you just but, and you?
Objection, Your Honor, as far as the reading.
As far as what?
Reading from the transcript, he's asked him if his memories are fresh.
All right, so go ahead and ask him a question. Don't read from the transcript.
Did you in fact say, in answer to the question, if it's not your wife and it's not your dog, who else is it possible on earth to answer this phone? Answer, yeah, it's only possible that it's me. Did you say that?
Yes.
Just before the break, I was asking you about those, as you indicated, many phone calls that you traded between and among your family members and friends, including Brian Higgins. You recall that?
Yes.
Were those many calls an effort to get your stories straight about how you were going to, what statements you were going to give to law enforcement and how you were going to testify if this case ever went to trial?
No, absolutely not.
Were those calls, those many calls, an effort to coordinate narratives between you and your friends and your family?
No.
Were those many calls in any way discussing the fact of creating a story of mysterious butt dials?
Objection.
Sustained.
Everyone, moving on?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
Okay. Mr. Wiley?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You were asked some questions about the week prior to being at the waterfall. At some point, you were at the hillside, correct?
Yes.
And you were there with friends and family, is that correct?
Yes.
You weren't specifically there with either Mr. O'Keefe or the defendant, correct?
No, I was not.
And same with respect to the waterfall on January 28th, you were there with friends and family, is that correct?
Yes.
You weren't specifically there with Mr. O'Keefe or the defendant, correct?
No, they came unrelated to anything I was doing.
And you were shown some video from the waterfall from January 28th in which you were speaking at a sort of section of the table, correct?
Yes.
And was the defendant the only person in that section of the table?
No.
There were other people around her, behind her, is that correct?
Yes, it looked like there were other people at the table as well as situated right behind where she was sitting.
And those other people around her, behind her, those are people that you knew far better on January 28th than the defendant?
Yes, those are my relatives and friends, and that's why I was at that location.
You were asking questions about going over to Ms. McCabe's house later on in the afternoon of the 29th, correct?
Yes.
Why did you go over there?
I went to Jen's house because she's my sister-in-law. She was going through an awful time that morning, as we all were. And I wanted to be there to comfort her if she needed anything. Because we're so close, I didn't want her to feel like this was too much for her to handle.
And again, how long have you known Ms. McCabe?
I've known Jen since she was probably 6 or 7 years old. She's like a sister to me.
Now, at your home on the January 28th and the January 29th when people came back after the waterfall, did you at any point in time go into the basement area of your home?
No.
Did Brian Higgins at any time go into the basement area of your home?
Not that I know of.
Did you see anyone go into the basement area of your home during the time that you were there after coming home from the waterfall?
No.
Now, you were asked some questions about your dog, Chloe, in that she wasn't great with strangers. What exactly did you mean by that?
All I meant was that she wasn't overly affectionate with strangers. She's a heavy dog. Not everybody likes dogs. So if there's going to be people at the house that don't know the dog, they might not particularly want her around them.
Were you more concerned about the people in the house that didn't know Chloe, or were you more concerned about Chloe herself?
The people in the house, never has the dog, to my knowledge, been aggressive to anybody except for the time that there was a fight between two dogs.
Now, you were shown in Exhibit 66 that was sort of a drawing of your house. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Had you ever seen that prior to today?
No.
And do you recall specifically within the drawing or the artist rendering of your house, there were certain lights on around the garage and the front door?
I did notice that, yes.
And do you recall whether or not those lights were on when you came home from the waterfall on January 29th?
I don't recall, but oftentimes those lights are off, and sometimes the bulbs don't even work in them.
And when Ms. McCabe comes into your bedroom sometime after 6 a.m. on the 29th,
Yes.
that was following a day in which you woke up in New York City and went to a funeral, is that correct?
Yes, I went to a funeral that morning in New York.
And that was for a fallen police officer from the New York City Police Department?
Yes, a police officer in New York that had been murdered while on duty, and that was his funeral.
And did you know that police officer whose funeral you attended?
Objection.
The objection sustained. Next question.
Now, with reference to, you then drive all the way home from New York to Massachusetts, correct?
Yes.
And you went out to a couple of different places, had a couple of drinks, correct?
Yes.
And then went back to your home and went to bed sometime around 2 a.m. or so?
Yes, after 2.
And so about how long had you been asleep from the time that you dozed off to the time that Ms. McCabe comes into your bedroom that morning?
Only a few hours, probably 3-4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours.
Now, in relation to waking up that morning, you testified that you did not go outside, correct?
Yes.
And why not?
Initially, when I woke up and I was told what was going on out front, I looked out my window and I saw some emergency vehicles. I did not see John at that time. I came downstairs with my wife and she asked, where was John? And Jen said that he was...
Sustained. Next question.
What was your understanding of where Mr. O'Keefe was when he came downstairs?
Objection.
Ask it differently, Mr. Lally.
In reference to when you came downstairs, what was your understanding of medically what was going on outside your house?
Objection.
The objection sustained.
Was there any reason for you to go outside of your house at that time?
No, it was not. At that time, there was no victim out in front of my house. So there was no first aid for me to give. There was nothing I could do.
You were asking questions about the sort of bulkhead in the back of your house, correct?
Yes.
Where is that bulkhead in relation to the bay windows of the kitchen that you were testifying about?
So the bulkhead door is directly under the bay windows in the kitchen. The bulkhead door opens up almost directly into the windows, obviously without hitting them, but it opens up into the front of the bay windows.
What you saw as far as that video that was shown to you, that's not what the bulkhead looked like, that's not what the door looked like at that time on January 28th or 29th of 2022?
No, those are not the doors we had.
And as far as the bulkhead was concerned, when that bulkhead was opened around that time, what if any kind of noise would that bulkhead make?
A loud creaking, old rusty metal sound when you opened it.
Is that something that if it was open and you were in the kitchen area, you could hear?
Yes.
Now, in reference to that bulkhead, what if any security or what if, was it open, was it locked? How was that done?
So the bulkhead door was shut and it was broken. So sometimes you could turn the metal thing to lock it, and sometimes it would be hard to do. But the wooden door that goes into the basement has a lock on the doorknob. That is a door that we keep locked because we don't use it.
Now, as far as from the bulkhead, you were shown in that video a gate that opens up to the front yard area of the house, is that correct?
Yes.
And what if any other gates are located on the fence in your backyard?
So we also have a gate on the rear part of the fence. And there's also a gate on the opposite side of the house.
And the gate in the rear area of the fence, where does that lead to?
So that leads to some woods, and then eventually you'll hit some train tracks.
Now, with respect to your phone, that was something that you had upgraded prior to any notification you received from the district attorney's office or anything in relation to preserving the phone, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with respect to that, as far as the information contained within the phone, there are certain types of information, are you familiar with being sort of backed up by the cloud?
Yes.
Would that include calls?
It could.
Could that also include text?
Yes.
Could that include photos?
Yes.
Could that include contacts?
Yes.
And the information that you were shown as far as certain call logs or call records, as far as you know, was that generated after that September of 2022 date?
Yes.
Now, with respect to the preservation, that was in regard to a motion the council had filed for your physical phone, correct?
Yes.
Are you also aware of a judge's order denying that repeatedly as far as them gaining access to your physical phone?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, it was denied on multiple occasions.
I'll strike the multiple occasions.
You were asked some questions about boxing, correct?
Yes.
And the boxing that you did, that was in relation to a group associated with the Boston Police Department, is that correct?
Yes.
And when was the last time that you were involved in any kind of actual boxing match?
Close to 20 years ago.
Now, with respect to some of the training that you were talking about, with respect to the Boston Police Department, you were given some training as far as defensive tactics, is that correct?
Yes.
And is that something that is standard, that is sort of given and administered to every Boston police officer?
Yes, and within the academy, you go to the defensive tactics training.
And that would include John O'Keefe, correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as your house, where you used to live, 34 Fairview Road, what, if anything, did you observe or notice with reference to cell phone reception in that area of your home?
So oftentimes, using the phone within my house, it seemed like it was and it's a slang term, the dead zone for the phone. The reception wasn't great.
And is that something that recurred over the time that you lived there?
Yes.
Now, with reference to the phone, and prior to the intimate moment that you shared with your wife sometime after 2 a.m., do you recall whether or not the phone screen was locked at that time? Were you checking that at that particular time?
I don't recall the exact timing, but I know it was opened sometimes and then it was closed, obviously, at some point, but I don't know the exact timing.
So the phone may not have been locked at the time that you began that situation with your wife.
It may not have been.
With reference to the call logs, the phone records that you were shown, best of your memory, is that the entirety of the phone calls that you made around that time?
No, it looks like it's selective people and numbers.
And with respect to those conversations, if you recall, what, if anything, in general terms, were you discussing with either those people in the logs or other people in general?
In general, I'm sure there was some discussion about the awful thing that had taken place, and there may have been other calls unrelated as well.
Can I have one moment here?
Yes.
Mr. Albert, on the early morning of January 29, 2022, did John O'Keefe ever come into your house that night?
John never came into my house that night. He would have been welcomed, and the defendant would have been welcomed with open arms had they come in, and I wish they had. I really do.
Were you ever even aware that John O'Keefe or the defendant were anywhere in the area of your house during that early morning of January 29?
I was not.
And nothing further on.
Very briefly.
Okay.
So we talked about cell phone reception not being good in your house. When did you and Mr. Wiley talk about that cell phone reception issue?
The what?
Cell phone reception issue in your house.
It came up during one of the preps.
Which prep?
I don't remember which prep, probably the last one.
I thought you only had one prep with Mr. Wiley.
Well, we had the prep before the grand jury, and then I had the prep for this trial.
Okay, so
So that's two.
So you brought up the fact that you had bad cell phone reception in that preparation?
The conversation came up, yes.
Mr. Wiley taking notes?
I don't recall if he was taking notes.
Was this recorded?
I don't believe so.
And where did you say this conversation took place?
So the prep was at the district attorney's office, which is in Canton.
This morning when I asked you, you said you couldn't quite remember where it took place.
You're right, I couldn't remember this morning.
And I asked you, could it have been the DA's office, and now your memory is refreshed?
Yes.
What refreshed your memory between this morning and now?
I was just thinking about it in my head and reminded myself that it was the DA's office. You caught me off guard when you would ask me. I didn't have it at the top of mind.
Did you talk to Mr. Lally over the lunch hour?
Briefly.
Bring up the fact that you had cell reception in your house over the lunch hour?
Just now, no.
What did you talk about over the lunch hour?
Just how much time I was going to have left on the stand. And that was really about it.
So you and Mr. Lally talked about the fact that you've been on cross-examination for 2.5 hours, and your conversation consisted of, you probably got another 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think he was going to lunch or doing something, so.
So you didn't talk about the substance of your testimony?
No.
He didn't tell you what questions he was going to ask you on redirect?
Maybe mentioned one thing he may ask me, but that was it.
Like, what was that?
Just he was going to ask about what happened at the house in the morning. That's, some of the questions on redirect, that's all.
Meaning he was going to ask you the question about whether or not John came in the house?
No, not necessarily.
He was going to ask you about whether or not you had bad cell reception in the house?
No.
What was he going to ask you?
He was going to ask about the morning of the incident, about coming downstairs and why I didn't go outside.
Did he tell you what he thought would be helpful for the Commonwealth?
Nope.
Did he tell you how he thought you should answer that question?
No.
He did ask you about a situation concerning the motion to preserve, correct?
No.
I'm sorry. He asked you on redirect about the motion.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And he mentioned that there was a motion that had been denied for us to get, for the defense, to get access to your physical phone, correct?
Yes.
You're aware that that motion was denied in October of 2022, correct?
Yes.
You had already gotten rid of your phone a month earlier, hadn't you?
Yes.
And the preservation order from the judge was still in place when you got rid of that phone, wasn't it?
No, I believe the phone was upgraded prior to the preservation order.
Oh, right. The day before.
Yes.
Got it. That's all I had.
All right, Mr. Albert, you are all set, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jerry.
Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor, we'll call Brian Albert Jr. to the stand.
Okay.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, the papers that were left up there with the last witness, I don't think are marked as anything. I just
Okay.
return them to counsel.
Step right up here, man. Watch yourself. You stand and face the clerk.
You solemnly swear the honesty of the court and jury in the case argument, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
My name is Brian Albert Jr., and it's Albert.
And where do you live, sir?
I live currently in Norwood, MA.
And how long have you lived in Norwood?
I believe I think it's about a year, since last May.
And prior to moving to Norwood, where did you live before?
I lived in Canton,
And where specifically in Canton?
34 Fairview Road.
And how long was it, sir, that you lived at 34 Fairview?
I'm going to guess, but I'm going to say maybe about 10 years.
And how old are you now, sir?
I'm 25.
And with respect to both where you live in Norwood and where you live in Canton, who, if anyone, did you live there?
Well, when I lived in Canton, I lived at one point with my 4 siblings, but then some of them moved out. And then in Norwood now, it's basically just me and my parents, and 2 of my siblings are at school, so they come home in the summer and stuff.
And by your parents, your father's name is Brian Albert as well, is that correct?
Yes.
And your mother's name is Nicole?
Yes.
Now, do you work, sir?
Yeah, I do. I work in IT.
And how long have you been doing that?
That job will be a year, maybe a year in August, I believe.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to the time frame of January 28th, 2022 into January 29th, 2022. Do you recall that specific time frame?
Yes, I do.
And with the 28th and the 29th, do you know roughly what days of the week that was?
Maybe Friday and a Saturday, I believe.
And with respect to 28th or the 29th, what, if any, significance do those dates have?
Yeah, so the 29th is my birthday. The 28th was the day before my birthday, obviously. So I had a few friends over for my birthday.
And do you recall how old you were turning on the 29th of 2022?
That was, what, 2 years ago? So I'd be 23? 23, I think? Yeah, 23.
Now, in the week leading up to that weekend, what, if any, plans did you have with respect to sort of the night before and the night of your birthday?
Yeah, so I was kind of up in the air. I didn't know if I wanted to go out. I'm kind of a homebody person. I like to stay at home. So I was kind of up in the air. So my plan was to have some of my friends over to my house. We would eat, have a couple drinks, and then I would decide then if I wanted to go out locally in Canton or not. So that was my plan. And then a few days before, that's when we found out that the snowstorm was actually going to happen, because you know how they always say it's going to snow, and it never does. So then that kind of threw a wrench in it, but I was kind of like, well, we'll see what happens. And so we went along with the plan.
And that particular evening of January 28th,
Yeah.
At some point, people came over your house, is that correct?
Yes.
And about what time was it that the friends first started coming over?
I would say my friends first arrived probably around 7:30 p.m.
And who were the first of your friend group that came to your house that night?
The first 2 were Sarah and Julie.
And just for the record, Sarah's last name is what?
Levinson.
And Julie's last name is?
Nagel.
And with respect to them coming over to your house, was there anybody else from your household or your family or anybody else that was present when Sarah and Julie stopped by?
I believe when they first got there, my mom was still at the house. She hadn't left yet to go out where she was going.
Do you know where she was going that night?
I believe she was going to the Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Do you know who, if anyone, she was going there with?
Yeah, she got picked up by my Aunt Julie.
Now, Ms. Levinson and Ms. Nagel, how long have you known them?
I've known them, I would say, since high school. I think I was a sophomore and they're a year older than me. They were a junior. So probably a good 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years in between there.
And when they came over your house, what was it that you did?
Well, we were just hanging out. I had a few more friends who were on their way, so they came after. Probably around 8 o'clock, I would say, 8:15. They were there, and we were just all hanging out, listening to music. We ate some food. I think we played some card games. Just normal hangout stuff.
And over the course of this evening, did you yourself and your guests, did you also have some alcohol?
No, yeah, people were drinking. Yeah,
Recall, generally speaking, what people were drinking?
mostly like seltzers, like White Claws or Trulies and stuff like that.
Now, you mentioned that some other friends came about a half hour or so after Julie and Sarah arrived. Is that correct?
Yes.
And who were they?
They are. Do you want their full names or?
Please.
Okay. They are Catherine Duty. Trying to think. Emily Fabiano, Courtney Alba, and I think that's it that I can recall as I sit here.
And with respect to those other friends, how did you know them? How long did you know them?
I knew everyone from school. We all went to high school together. So the other ones were in my grade. So we were closer friends because they were in my grade. So I've known them for a long time.
And just to be clear, when you say from school, you're talking about high school?
High school, yes.
You went to Canton High School, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Now, with respect to having a friend over your house, where sort of within the house were you also hanging out?
We would all just kind of hang out probably, I would say, mostly in the dining room. The dining room and the kitchen were kind of like one big open space. So we would be like in the kitchen or the dining room. And sometimes I think we may have like walked into like the family room area, sat down for a little bit, but mostly it was just the dining room and the kitchen.
And the family room area, is that visible from the kitchen and dining room area?
There's a wall, but there is a doorway, door frame. So you can't see all of the family room, but you can see a good amount of it, yeah.
And as far as each of your respective friends that you were testifying came over your house, do you have any idea how they got there?
No, I don't know. None of them drove. I know that, so I would assume that they got dropped off by someone, but I don't know who.
So there wasn't like a pile of cars like out in front of your house at any point during the evening?
No, there wasn't.
Now, later on that evening, who, if anyone else, came by the house?
Well, my cousin Colin arrived at the house at some point, and then my mom and my dad and them came back from the waterfall back to the house at some point as well.
Now, with respect to your cousin, Colin, his last name is Albert as well?
Yes.
How is he related to you?
He is my first cousin. He's my dad's brother's son.
And his father would be Christopher Albert, is that correct?
Yes.
He's older, younger?
Is Colin younger than me?
Yes.
Yes, he is.
And about how old was Colin around this time?
Maybe 17, I think.
Was he in high school around this time?
I would assume so, yes.
And if you recall, how was it sort of that Colin came over to your house that night? Did he reach out to you at any point? Did you reach out to him?
Yeah, I don't exactly recall how he knew, I don't know how he knew that I was at my house, but at some point he did call me and said, "Oh, are you still at your house?" And I said yes. And he said, "Do you mind if I come by?" And I said, "No, of course you're welcome to come by."
And with regard to earlier at your house when you indicated that your mother went out to the waterfall, she went out with Julia, correct? And that's your aunt?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I asked you about 3 different questions.
No, it's all right.
As far as Colin is concerned, Julia is Colin's mother.
Yes.
Do you recall about what time it was that Colin came by?
I don't recall exactly. I would say maybe closer, maybe 10:45, 11 p.m.
And as far as the other people at the house, the women that you had over, did Colin know any of them that you knew of?
Yeah, Colin knew some of them just from being in the same town. And Colin's older brother is just 1 year older than me. So Colin's brother is in some of the greatest, some of the girls, in the greatest, some of the girls that were there. So that's how he knew them.
And just to be clear, Colin's older brother is also named Christopher Albert.
Yes.
And now when Colin came over to the house, as far as the things that you were describing for, as far as hanging out, is that essentially what continued after Colin's arrival?
Yeah, he was just another addition. We just were continuing to do the same stuff, hanging out.
Now, with respect to within the home, you mentioned sort of the kitchen, the dining area, and the family room. Were there any other areas of the house that anybody went to during the course of the evening?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, there's a bathroom, but it's just off the kitchen. So I assume the bathroom. But that's really it. We didn't go anywhere else than that first floor area.
So mainly in the first floor, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you see anybody at any time go down to the basement?
No.
Did you see anybody at any time go upstairs?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Now, you mentioned that at some points your parents and some people that were at the waterfall came to your house. Is that right?
Yeah. So first a group of my friends had left my house, and I think that was probably around. They were only there for a few minutes while Colin was there. So I would say probably around 11, 11:10. A few select people left the house to go home. So at that point, it was just me, Colin, Julie Nagel, and Sarah Levinson at the house until my parents arrived.
And so Courtney, Catherine, and Emily would have left at some point shortly after Colin arrived?
Yes.
And when your parents came home, if you recall, what was sort of the order of, do you recall about what time that was?
I would say that would be right around midnight. I would say maybe 12:05, 12:10ish in that area.
And just turning back to Colin for a second, do you recall, you know how Colin came to be at your house?
Like how he was dropped, like if he was dropped off.
Yeah, yes. Did you know whether or not he drove there, was dropped off there, similar to the other people that you
Well, I know he didn't drive there, but I would assume he got dropped off. He didn't say how he got there though.
Actually, Your Honor. Good to hear. Right, so we'll strike, you don't know how we got there.
Okay. Yeah.
And as far as the order of people that arrived back at your home, who were the first people to arrive back at your home from the waterfall?
The first people to arrive were my mom, my dad, my sister Caitlin, and my dad's friend Brian Higgins.
And prior to that evening of January 28th, had you met Mr. Higgins before?
I don't recall ever meeting him. I could have met him in passing, but I don't ever formally remember meeting him, no.
Do you recall ever seeing him at your house at Fairview Road prior to that?
I don't think he'd ever been there that I have saw, no.
And as far as Colin was concerned, when your parents and your sister and Mr. Higgins arrived, in relation to that, when did Colin leave your house?
Colin was actually getting up and leaving as they were coming into the house.
And similar to, do you know how Colin left your house or how whether or not he drove or was picked up or anything?
Yeah, he was sitting at the table and I was actually sitting right next to him and he stood up and said, "I'm leaving, Allie's picking me up." And so I knew who Allie was because she's my cousin.
And what is Allie's last name?
McCabe.
And she's your cousin as well, is that correct?
Yes.
She Colin Albert's cousin?
She's not Colin's cousin, no. She's my cousin on my mom's side.
And so Colin would be your cousin on your father's side?
Yes.
And following your father, your mother, your sister, and Mr. Higgins' arrival at the home, where did they sort of congregate within the home?
In the same area that we were in the dining room, in the kitchen area. My mom got home and I know she went right to cleaning because she likes to clean. So she was in the kitchen picking up. And yeah, we were all just in that one area.
And following their arrival back at the home, who, if anyone else, showed up at your home that particular evening?
And then I would say maybe 10 minutes later, my auntie JJ, well, her name is Auntie Jen, but I call her JJ, and Uncle Matt arrived at the house.
Your Auntie JJ and your Uncle Matt, what is their last name?
McCabe.
And was that, their arrival, was that before or after Colin had left?
Colin had already left at that point, yes.
And so the alley that Colin was picked up by, what, if any, relationship does she have to your Auntie JJ and your Uncle Matt?
That's their daughter.
Now, throughout the course of the evening, well, let me ask you this, as far as, when was it that the last person who didn't live at your house on Fairview Road, when was it that the last person left?
The last, I wouldn't know I couldn't tell you the time. Well, the last people to leave were Auntie JJ, Uncle Matt, Sarah, and Julie. I don't know exactly what time that would be. I can't even guess. I don't know.
And you mentioned your sister, Caitlin, was that?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I was just thinking of her as my sister, like sibling. So she didn't live in the house, so she was the last person to leave.
And prior to her leaving is when your Auntie JJ and Uncle Matt. And
Yes. Yeah.
So with respect to after your Aunt JJ and your Uncle Matt McCabe arrived at the house, who, if anyone else, came by the house that you were aware of?
No one.
Well, let me ask you this way. As far as anybody else following them actually physically come into the house?
No one else came into the house after them, no.
And at some point, were you made aware of someone out in front of you?
I saw someone outside of the house, yes, a car.
And what was it that sort of drew your attention to the front area of the house?
Yeah, so at some point, my friend Julie stood up and said, "Oh, my brother's outside." Her brother was there to pick her up. And someone made a comment saying, "Oh, no."
Not what they said. What happened as a result?
Okay. She went outside to talk to her brother. And so I looked out the window at that point. And she was outside talking to her brother, so his truck was there. And I saw another car there as well.
And with respect to your friend Julie Nagel, her brother, what is his name?
His name's Ryan Nagel.
And if you recall the time that Julie gets up and goes outside to talk to her brother, where were you within the house?
I was still sitting at the dining room table.
And with regard to that area of the dining room table, how was it that you were able to see out in front of the house?
There's 2 windows there, so I just turned around and looked through the blinds.
And when you looked through the blinds, what is it that you saw out in front of your house at that time?
Yeah, so I saw a truck, which was Julie Nagel's brother's truck, I believe, and that was a little ways, almost like in front of the driveway of the house, and then a little ways in front of it, there was another car that I hadn't recognized before. It was a dark SUV-ish, and that's all I knew about it and could see about it.
Now, similar to yourself, with anyone else from sort of this group of people, either in the kitchen or in the house, did you observe near a window or a door that was looking on that?
I believe my uncle Matt McCabe noticed the car outside as well.
And with respect to the dark SUV that you didn't recognize and what you thought was Julie Nagel's brother Ryan's truck, was there anything in between the truck and the dark SUV that you saw outside?
Not to my knowledge, I didn't see anything, no.
And as far as the weather, when you looked outside, what, if anything, did you know about the weather?
It was definitely snowing. I wouldn't know how many inches, but I would say an inch or 2 of snow at that point.
Now, with regard to being out in front of your house, those 2 vehicles, do you recall which direction they were facing?
Yeah, they were both facing, going up Fairview towards Cedar Crest. So whatever this is, I don't know.
Well, let me ask you probably in a better way. As far as what was facing towards your house, was that the driver's side or the passenger side of each of the vehicles?
That would have been the passenger side.
And that's with respect to both vehicles, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, at any point in time during the time that these vehicles were up in front of your house, do you recall hearing anything or any sort of noises coming from the front of your house that drew your attention?
No, I didn't hear anything, no.
And as far as looking out the windows and seeing these vehicles in front of your house, how many times did you look up?
I believe I looked at that one time, and then I think I looked out one more time after that.
And as far as your friend Julie, if you know about how long was she out in front of your house at that time?
I would say not more than 5 minutes, more likely about 3 or 4 minutes she was outside.
And when did you see her outside in relation to the truck as well?
Yeah, I saw her at the passenger door of the truck.
Now, that vehicle that you observed that you didn't recognize, the darker black SUV, was that vehicle in one place or more than one place during the times that you looked out the window and saw it?
Yeah, so the first time I looked, I would say it was closer towards the mailbox, maybe a little bit in front of the mailbox. And then the last time I looked out the window, it had moved further down, closer to, I'll say, the flagpole. So closer that way, it went down that way, towards the flagpole.
So closer to there's an area in the front of your yard where there's flagpoles, is that right?
Yes.
Now, as far as when it moved, as far as the weather and the snow was concerned, could you see anything in relation to the roadway behind the SUV as it once it had moved from that initial position to the following position by the flagpole?
Yeah, I had noticed just some tracks in the snow, indicating that the car had moved up.
Now, your friend Julie, did she take that ride home with her brother Ryan at that time?
No, she came back in the house.
And as far as your friends Julie and Sarah that were still at the house when people from the waterfall came home, do you know how they happened to go home on that particular evening?
Yes, my aunt, J.J. McCabe, and Matt McCabe drove them home.
And do you have any idea about what time that was?
No, not really. I'd be guessing. I would say maybe one something, maybe.
Now, with respect to your sister, Caitlin, who you indicated was the last person to leave the home that evening, is that correct?
Yes.
And were you awake or downstairs?
I don't know if I was downstairs when she actually left, but I was down there for a minute when she was the last one present at the house with my mom.
And do you know how she was leaving the house that night or how she was getting home?
Yeah, I believe her boyfriend was picking her up.
What's her boyfriend's name?
Tristan Morris.
Sir, if I could turn your attention to the following morning. At some point you go to bed. Do you know about what time it was that you went to bed?
I would say, I don't know, late 1, early 2 o'clock in the morning.
And your bedroom is in the second floor of the house? Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And with respect to how many bedrooms are up on the top floor? Or what?
4, I believe.
And with respect to your bedroom, where was that in relation to the layout of the house?
My bedroom would have been the middle back of the house. So I had 2 windows, but they were in the backyard of the house. So the middle, but the back side.
So the 2 windows that from your bedroom face the backyard area?
Yes.
Now, at any point in time after you went up to your room, same question as before, were there any noises or anything that drew your attention outside of the home at any point prior to you waking up?
No, I didn't hear anything.
And if you know about what time was it that you woke up later on that morning of the 29th?
I can't recall the exact time. I'd say maybe, I know previous testimony I may have said earlier, but I don't believe it was that early. I would say 7:30, 8 a.m.
What was it that woke you up that morning?
My dad had knocked on my door.
And without anything specifically that you and your dad talked about, following that conversation, where did you go?
I just threw on some clothes and I went downstairs into the main first floor of the house.
When you came downstairs into the main first floor area of the house, who, if anyone, did you see?
Yeah, so when I went down there, it was my mom, my dad, my auntie Jen, and my uncle Matt.
And about how long were you down in that area of the home?
I would say the first time I went down there, I would say I was down there for maybe 15 minutes or so.
You said the first time you went down, were there subsequent times after that?
Well, yes, I went back up into my room after I was down there the first time, and then I came back downstairs. And at that point, there was no one there besides me and my parents.
And that second or subsequent time that you came downstairs that morning, to know about how long it was after the first time?
I would say maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe.
Now, with respect to your birthday, as far as what, if any, sort of ritual or thing do you have with regard to your Aunt Julie?
Oh, yes. So my aunt likes to get me donuts. It started, I don't even know, probably when I was like in middle school. Because I used to really like donuts. So every birthday she would give me six donuts in a box and a card. And that was just our ritual. She would bring it over every time it was my birthday.
And did you get those, as far as the donuts and the card and everything, at some point on that particular morning?
Yes, I believe that when I went downstairs the first time, the donuts and the card were there already. So I had known that she had come by and dropped them off for me.
Did you physically actually see your Aunt Julie on that particular morning?
No, I didn't see her then.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
So, I'm going to show you a series of 4 photographs. I just ask you to look at those to yourself. And then
Okay.
look at your friends.
Okay.
And just generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, this is my old residence.
The full residence at 34 Fairview Road, is that correct?
Yes.
And generally speaking, what's depicted in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what the house looked like around that time?
Yes.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Call multiple seat to introduce and admit as the next board exhibit.
Any objection, Ms. Little?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Exhibit 70 through 73. Thank you.
May I return to the witness, Your Honor?
Just basically what's now been marked as exhibit 71, 72, and 73.
Okay.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that those 3 photographs be published in succession.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could first have, I believe it's 2592. Sir, what's up on the screen? Is that what you have before you? As I believe it should be exhibit 71, probably.
Yes, that's the same.
And again, just for the record, do you recognize what's up on the screen now?
Yes, I do.
Now, before I get into the photograph, there is one other question that I need to ask. As far as, with respect to the sort of tenor and demeanor of that evening, how would you describe sort of, from when your friends were there to the time that the folks came back from the waterfall, how was sort of the mood within that?
Cheerful, fun. Everyone was having a great time.
Any fights, any arguing, any tension, anything else that you noted of note with regard to that?
No, not at all.
And I believe, sir, there should be a laser pointer on the desk here in front of you. Just push the button on top.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question about it with respect to the picture.
Okay.
Now, with regard to the front area of your house, at 34 Fairview Road when you live there, there's basically 2 doors on the front of the house, correct?
Yes.
And if you could just use that laser pointer to direct the jury's attention to where in the photograph you observe each of those 2 doors.
Okay. So this would be the first door, right here, and this is the second door.
And the first door is sort of further away from the driveway. Is that sort of the front door area of the home?
Yes, that's the front door.
And the other door, where does that lead?
The side door leads just right into the family room.
And as far as around this time, January, or on this evening, if you recall, where were people sort of coming in and going out of their house?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you specifically. I think some people use both doors.
And what we're calling sort of the front door area, that's sort of one closer to the garage leads into the living room, is that correct?
Yes.
And so the front door further away from the garage, where does that lead into?
That's like a foyer area, and then if you take a right, it leads you to the dining room, kitchen, and then you keep going into the family room.
Now, if you don't take a right and go into the kitchen and the dining room, and then sort of into the family room, just sort of go straight, where does that lead you?
Well, you can't really go straight. If you walk in a little ways to the left, there's a set of stairs that go upstairs, and you can go straight a little bit, and then to your left again, there's stairs that go downstairs into the basement.
Now, in addition to you, your mother, your father, did, around the time of January 2022, did you have a pet as well?
Yeah, we had a dog, Chloe.
Well, the dog named Chloe?
Yes.
About how long at that point had you had Chloe?
We had her for a few years. I don't know exactly how many years, but a few years.
Now, on that night, specifically January 28th leading into the 29th, did you do anything as far as letting Chloe out, use the bathroom or anything like that?
Yeah, sorry. So the dog was actually upstairs in my parents' bedroom. She likes to sleep up there and stay up there. So she was upstairs when my friends were downstairs. And at one point, after my dad came home, it was asked if someone let the dog out. And I said, sorry, I forgot, because it was my responsibility, because I was the only one home. So he went upstairs to get the dog, got the dog, brought her downstairs, let her outside.
And so when someone would let Chloe outside around this time, so can you describe that process as far as would it be a leash or just let her out, or how that?
Yeah, so we had a fenced-in backyard, so we just kind of let her through the back door and open the door, and she was able to run around out back.
What let her out? Would they typically still stay back or
Yeah, we stay around the kitchen area, yeah.
And Ms. Yeoman, if I could have the next photo up on screen, 2593. So the next exhibit would be number 72. What's up on the screen? Is that what you have for you, sir?
Yes.
Now, if you could, with regard to this photograph, you were mentioning something about a flagpole in the area of your front yard, is that correct?
Yeah.
Using that laser pointer, you could direct the jury's attention where that is.
Right here.
Now, with respect to this photograph that's up on the screen right now, Ms. Nagel's brother Ryan, where was, if you could direct the jury's attention, where was about to occur that time?
He would have been more this way, so the photo doesn't show you all, but he would have been more in front of the driveway over here.
And that first time that you looked out the window, where was the dark SUV?
I believe that was right around the mailbox area, right about right here.
And then again, if you could direct the jury's attention to the second time that you looked out and the SUV had moved, where had it moved to that?
It was more down this way, on the side of the road.
Now, if you could, as far as the windows that you're talking about in the kitchen area that you were looking out at, can you see those in the photograph as well?
Yes, I do.
If you could direct the jury's attention to where you can see those.
Those are about right, those two right there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the last photograph on that set. And then what's up on screen, sir, that you have for you now is it's 73.
Yes.
And again, this is another photograph of the front area of your home, taken around time January 2022, correct?
Yes.
And as far as the flagpole in this particular area, that's off to the left center of the screen, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, in between the time that you saw that dark SUV that you didn't really recognize, in the area of the mailbox and then further down, did you see it at any other points moving along?
No, I just caught it as it had already moved. By the time I looked out the window, I noticed that it had moved up.
And facing the same direction, is that correct?
Yes.
Same passenger side door that was facing your house?
Yeah.
And as far as the dark SUV was concerned, at any point in time did you look out and not see the dark SUV?
No, I didn't look out the window again.
So for the rest of the evening, you didn't look out?
No.
Now, in reference to the time that expired, between the time that you saw it in the area mailbox and the time that you saw it over by the flagpole, do you have any idea how long period of time that was?
I would say probably within a couple minutes. It wasn't a long period of time that I looked out the window.
And as far as you know, your friend Julie, who had gone out to the pickup truck to talk to her brother Ryan, was she still outside around the time that you looked out the second time?
She could have been. I'm not sure if she was at that point, but she could have been.
And this guy, you can take that. May I have just one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Let me just ask just a couple of questions.
Okay.
With regard to that morning when you woke up, your father was at your door?
Yes.
As far as from what you could see of his person, what, if any, injuries or anything did you observe on his person at that time?
On my father?
Yes.
Nothing.
Now, at that time, January 28th and January 29th, 2022, did you know anybody by the name John O'Keefe?
I knew of the name, but I didn't know him personally, no.
And when you say you knew of the name or you knew of him, how did you know?
I knew he was friendly with my auntie Jen McCabe, and his niece was friendly with my cousin Jen's daughter.
And as far as your cousins, as far as Miss McCabe's daughters, what if anything, what if any sort of relationship did you have with them, specific to them, beyond sort of your other cousins?
Oh yeah, so for a while, I think when I was in college or maybe the end of high school, I would help out because there was 4 girls, so they always had like multiple sports going on and stuff. So I would drive them to and from practices or be there after school if JJ had to be somewhere. So I spent a good amount of time with them and basically babysitting, but more just driving around and stuff like that.
And through them, is that how you came to know Mr. O'Keefe's niece Kaylee?
Yes.
And you gave her rides to places as well?
Yeah, occasionally when she would come back to the house after school, I'd drive her to CCD or whatever.
And had you ever met, to your recollection, John O'Keefe or anybody by the name of Karen Reed prior to January 28th?
John O'Keefe, no. I mean, he could have came into the house once when I was there at my aunt JJ's house, and we could have said hi, but I don't remember formally meeting him, and I never met Karen Reed either.
And on that evening, again, January 28th or the early morning of January 29th, beyond the people that you've already talked about, and specifically John O'Keefe or Karen Reed, did either of them at any point in time come inside your house while you were there that evening?
No, never.
Nothing further.
Okay. Ms. Little, I'm just going to hold you up for 1 minute. I think we probably need spellings of the...
Yeah, we do. I don't know if I'm going to be the best speller, but I'll try. think that's good. The first one is correct. You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Ms. Little.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Albert, the first time you ever spoke with anyone from the Massachusetts State Police, the Canton Police Department, or the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office was on July 6, 2023, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
That's a full 18 months after Mr. O'Keefe's death, correct?
Yes.
Who was present for that interview?
I spoke with 2 troopers, I believe, and my lawyer.
Trooper Proctor was there?
Yes.
And this interview actually took place at your family's defense attorney's office, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection is
This interview took place at your attorney's office, correct?
Yes.
Your sister, Caitlin Albert, was also present, correct?
She was there for some time, but she wasn't when I was interviewing. She wasn't in the room with me. No.
And that was also the first time they had spoken with your sister as well about these events, correct?
Objection.
And to be clear, the Massachusetts State Police only interviewed you after you were called to testify before a grand jury.
Objection.
Separate proceeding, correct?
The objection is
I want to direct your attention to your testimony regarding your cousin, Colin Albert. You testified today that Colin Albert called you to come to the house, correct?
I believe so. He did. Yeah.
Do you recall some prior testimony in which you said that you all had exchanged Snapchats about what you were doing that night in the house?
No, I don't believe I said that. I said for him to know that I was at the house, he could have seen a Snapchat that I had sent, but he didn't ask me on Snapchat if he can come over. I said more of that he had could have seen a Snapchat saying that we were at my house. That's how he knew, because I didn't know how he knew that we were there.
You and your cousins frequently communicate on Snapchat, correct?
Occasionally here and there.
You actually have a cousin group chat on Snapchat, don't you?
Yeah, we do. An Albert cousin group chat.
Who else is on that Snapchat?
There's all my cousins, a lot of us, a good amount of my cousins.
Would that include you,
Yep.
Colin Albert,
Yep.
Allie McCabe?
No, she's not an Albert.
Do you have a group chat in which Allie McCabe is a member?
I believe we have a cousins on my mom's side group chat, yes. But she wouldn't be in that group chat with Colin, no.
Understood. And do you still have any of the messages you exchanged with your cousin on January 28th?
I don't know. Can you rephrase the question?
Do you have any of those Snapchat messages or other messages that you exchanged with your cousin Colin Albert on January 28th?
No, I'm not even sure if there was any messages. Not to my knowledge, I don't know.
Mr. Albert, you testified that Colin arrived around 10:45 or 11 p.m., correct?
Today? I said that? Yes? Yes.
Who else was at the house when the clock struck sort of midnight as it became your birthday?
When it hit my birthday, it was just Colin, Julie, Nagel, and Sarah Levinson.
Was there any sort of celebration for your birthday when the clock struck midnight?
No.
What were you guys doing?
We were just sitting there. Probably happy birthdays were exchanged, but it was nothing crazy. I'm not a big birthday person like that.
And where in the house were you guys at that point?
In the dining room area.
You testified that your parents, Brian Higgins, arrived shortly after midnight with your sister, correct?
Yeah, I believe I said around 12:05, 12:10 in that area.
Describe what happened when they came into the house that night.
They all just walked in the door, and at that point, my cousin Colin was standing up to leave. They passed each other, said hi, and that was it.
Mr. Albert, you never actually observed Colin leave in a vehicle from 34 Fairview, correct?
No, I didn't see with my eyes, no.
In fact, you said you only looked out the window 2 times that night, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Approximately what time did your dad go upstairs to get Chloe to take her out?
Well, that would have been like as soon as he got home, so around like a little after 12.
So would that have been before or after Colin sort of walked towards the door?
Colin had already left at that point.
Where did your dad go?
He went upstairs into his bedroom where Chloe was there, brought her downstairs and went to the back door and let her out.
And you were asked by Mr. Lally if your father kind of stands by the door and waits for Chloe before he lets her in.
Yeah.
But you testified that he was just generally in the kitchen area, correct?
Yeah, the kitchen is by the back door.
But he's not standing by the door waiting for her. She's an off-leash dog. She can go out, do her business, and you can open the door sometime later, correct?
Objection.
Can you answer that? Is that correct?
Could you say it again, please?
Your father wasn't standing by the door, staring at Chloe the entire time that she was outside, correct?
No, I wouldn't. Not the whole time, no.
You testified earlier that Julie Nagel went outside to speak with her brother to indicate that she no longer needed a ride. Do you recall that testimony?
I'm not sure if I said that exactly, but yeah.
Can you describe sort of what you saw the first time you looked out the window?
I just saw a little in front of the driveway a little bit. I saw a truck. I saw my friend Julie at the passenger door. I suppose talking to the people in the truck. And a little ways up, I saw another dark SUV that I wasn't aware of.
And so you agree that there was nothing obstructing the view between the truck and the dark SUV, correct?
Well, not from my vantage point, no.
And the second time you looked out the window, the only difference you saw was that Ms. Reed's vehicle had pulled up, correct?
Well, I didn't know it was Miss Reed's vehicle, but the car that was there had moved up, yes.
And the truck was no longer there, correct?
The second time I looked out the window? That I'm not sure of.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at your testimony?
Sure.
from July 6, 2020, or sorry, May 18, 2023. Stand for sure.
Yes. So show Mr. Louder.
You can just look at this for a
Okay.
And you can look up when your recollection is refreshed.
Okay. Yep.
Does that refresh your recollection as to what you testified to
Sure. Yes.
on May 18, 2023?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you said that the second time you looked out, you saw that there was a black SUV that had pulled forward,
Yes.
but the truck was no longer there?
Sure. It seems like I said that then. Yes.
You also testified earlier that you saw tire tracks in the snow, correct?
Yep.
Where were those tracks?
Just along the side towards the driveway along this way, going up towards the flagpole.
And you viewed those tracks kind of leading up towards the flagpole, correct?
Yes.
So you'd agree that the visibility and lighting in front of the house was good enough that you were able to see tire tracks in the snow, correct?
Sure.
But you did not see a 220-pound man lying in the snow in your front yard, did you?
Objection.
Was that something that you saw, sir?
No, I didn't see that.
Who was in the house the second time that you looked out the window?
It would have been my mom, my dad, Brian Higgins, my sister, Julie, Sarah, Uncle Matt.
Mr. Albert, you testified on May 18, 2023
Mm-hmm.
in another grand jury, and you said, quote, "I'm not sure if Brian Higgins was still there. I know he left at some point." Do you recall that testimony?
I mean, I know he left my house at some point. I just don't know exactly when it was.
You were asked specifically at the time that you looked out the window who was there, and you said, "I'm not sure if Brian Higgins was there."
Yeah.
Isn't that correct?
Okay, if I said that, yes, because I was not sure. I'm still not sure that if he was there or not.
So you're not sure whether Brian Higgins was there when you looked out the window, correct?
No, I'm not sure.
You have no independent recollection as you sit here today where Mr. Higgins was when you looked out the window, correct?
No.
You also didn't recall Mr. Higgins ever saying goodbye to you or your group, correct?
I believe that's true. Yeah.
In fact, you actually testified before another grand jury on May 18, 2023, that at some point Mr. Higgins just wasn't there anymore. I must have gone to the bathroom or something. I came back and I said, "Where did Higgins go?" And they said he left, correct?
Sure. Yes.
You also testified before that grand jury.
Objection, Your Honor.
So, yeah, I'm going to see a sidebar. If you could bring that, please.
Mr. Albert, isn't it true that you weren't quite so sure about that when you testified on May 18, 2023?
I don't know. You would have to show me.
Do you have a specific recollection of your father leaving after Mr. Higgins was gone?
Yep, I'm pretty sure he went upstairs after Brian Higgins left.
Mr. Albert, I'd like to show you. May I approach your hand? So.
Right here. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Albert, isn't it true that you told the grand jury, "I'm pretty sure Mr. Higgins left first before my dad went upstairs, because he wouldn't have left if his friend was still there"?
Yes, I just said that here as well.
I mean, you don't have any specific recollection as you sit here today where your father was or where Mr. Higgins was when you looked out the window that night,
No,
correct?
no, that's not true. I know that my father was in the room with us. I'm saying I don't know. I'm saying I don't know when Brian Higgins left the house. And when Brian Higgins left the house, then my father went upstairs into his bedroom.
But what you actually said was, quote, "I'm pretty sure Mr. Higgins left first before my dad went upstairs because he wouldn't have left if his friend was still there," correct?
I see what you're saying. Yes, but I still say that my dad wouldn't have went upstairs until Brian Higgins left the house.
Right, and that's based on an assumption, correct?
Sure. Yeah.
Because you weren't interviewed about this case until 18 months later, correct?
Yeah.
You did not personally observe your father go upstairs, correct?
No, I did. I watched him go up the stairs. I was standing I was in the kitchen. You can see the stairs right there.
Your testimony is you can see individuals walk upstairs in your house.
Depending on,
Kitchen?
yes, the dining room, from the dining room I meant.
There's actually a wall that kind of blocks the dining room to the stairs,
No,
correct?
not if you're sitting at the two chairs with your back to the windows. If I was sitting in the long chair right here, the stairs would be right here. I could easily see through the doorway.
But as you sit here today, you don't know what time that happened, correct?
No, I don't know the time. No.
Mr. Albert, I'd like to direct your attention to the morning of January 29th.
Sure.
Can you describe sort of how you woke up that morning?
My dad just knocked on my door, and I woke up and opened the door.
You didn't hear any dog barking?
No,
You didn't see any emergency vehicles?
no,
Didn't hear any ambulances?
no,
Didn't hear any screaming outside?
no.
What did you do once you woke up?
I went downstairs.
Did Did you ever look out the window?
I don't recall if I did or not.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at your grand jury testimony?
Sure,
2018,
sure.
2023?
Thank you.
Tell Mr. Lally what page or something. Okay.
It's lines 8 to 12.
Okay. Yep.
Is your recollection refreshed?
Sure, yeah.
Why didn't you look out the window that morning?
Well, I say here that I just would give me anxiety to look out the window.
Is there a reason that you didn't want to look outside?
I'm just an anxious person, and I got overwhelmed. I think most people would be overwhelmed in that situation.
Did you say that this was kind of a new thing for you, for cops and police to be at the house?
Yeah, that's never happened before. I've never had cops at or near my house.
And it made you overwhelmed, correct?
Yeah, I get overwhelmed easy, so.
Mr. Albert, how many times did you discuss this case with members of your family before you spoke to the Massachusetts State Police on May 18, 2023?
I don't have an answer for that. I don't know how many times.
Hundreds?
We talk about it pretty decent. I mean, considering, yeah.
What members of your family have you discussed this case with?
My parents, my sister, occasionally my aunt, JJ, and Uncle Matt.
Would you say it's been hundreds of conversations?
Well, I guess you can, I mean, you'd have to split it up and quantify what conversations were about the actual case and what conversations have been the harassment we faced since then.
And all of these discussions took place with you and members of your family prior to your interview with the Massachusetts State Police, correct?
And no, we've talked since then.
You need to speak with them about this case.
Not,
Since your interview.
I don't know what you mean by this case. This case meaning the actual case at hand, or just the case about the harassment we faced?
I'm talking about what happened on January 28th and January 29th.
But there's really nothing to talk about those specifics, no, because we have nothing to say about that. We weren't part of it.
Mr. Albert, you looked out the window multiple times on January 29th, correct?
Twice, I think I said?
You never heard any sort of commotion outside?
No,
You never heard screaming, yelling, or the screech of brakes in the front yard?
no,
You never saw a 220-pound man in dark clothes in the white snow on your front lawn?
no,
But you did see those tire tracks,
I
correct?
did.
No further questions.
Okay, Mr. Lally?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Sorry?
No redirect.
You all set?
All right, Mr. Albert, you're all set, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Lally, your next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth call Ms. Caitlin Albert to the stand.
Step right in, squat yourself on me. Step right up. Maintain your face close.
Can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the evidence of the court and jury in the case down here to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may take this seat.
Go ahead, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Sure. Caitlin Albert, Caitlin Albert.
And where do you live, ma'am?
I live in Easton,
And how long have you lived there?
about 3 years.
Who, if anyone, do you live there with?
I live with Tristan Morris, my boyfriend.
And you and Ms. Morris, about how long have the two of you lived there?
Almost 8 years.
Now, prior to living in Easton, where was it that you lived before that?
I lived in Canton,
And specifically, where in Canton did you live?
34 Fairview Road.
And how long was it that you lived at 34 Fairview Road?
Geez, I lived there from about 2011 to 2021.
And that was a family home, is that right?
Yes.
And who did you live at 34 Fairview Road with?
My mom, my dad, and my 4 siblings.
And your mom's name is Nicole, is that right?
Yes.
And your dad or your father's name is Ryan Albert?
Yes.
And how many siblings did you have, I'm sorry?
I have 4.
Are you the oldest?
I am.
And do you work for?
I do.
What do you do for?
I work for the Massachusetts Attorney General's office in the Medicaid Fraud Division.
And how long have you been doing that?
Almost 3 years, I think. In September, it'll be 3 years.
Now, if I could excuse me, turn your attention to January 28th, 2022 to January 29th, 2022. Do you recall that time frame?
I do.
And do you recall what days of the week they were?
I actually am not sure that I recall the exact days of the week. Maybe Friday or Saturday.
Fair to say around the weekend time?
Yeah, weekend, definitely.
And as far as your family is concerned, the 29th, what if any significance is that to you?
That would be my brother's birthday.
And which of your brothers is it whose birthday that was?
Brian Albert Jr.
And is beyond Brian Albert Jr., just for sake of my own lack of confusion, is there some other name that you would call him as far as differentiating him between your brothers?
Little Brian, sometimes, even though he's not so little.
Okay. And so during the course of that week, sort of leading up to the weekend, what if any discussion did you have with your mother or anybody else in your family in regard to little Brian's birthday?
So leading up to that weekend, I was aware that my brother might have like a friend or two over the house for his birthday. And then I had spoken with my mom and my aunt, Julie Albert, about maybe going to a local Canton bar, grabbing some food and some drinks, and just kind of seeing where the night takes us, and then maybe ultimately going back and seeing my brother for just to say happy birthday, kind of end the night that way.
As the week went along, what, if anything, sort of affected or changed plans in reference to that?
Nothing that I can really think of. Nothing really changed. I mean, that was sort of, I don't remember exactly how the plan came about, that we were going to, go get food and that my brother was going to have friends over, but I believe that was always sort of our plan.
And so specifically on the 28th, at some point you came to Canton, correct?
Yes.
And do you recall how you came to Canton and where was it that you went first?
So I can't say for sure. From what I remember, I believe that my boyfriend, Tristan, and I went straight from Easton to the waterfall and actually got there before my mom and my Aunt Julie, from what I can remember. And then my mom and Julie ended up meeting us there. And that's when we sort of started just kind of like hanging out, ordering food, some drinks. And we were there for a little bit, just the four of us.
And do you recall about what time it was that you got to the waterfall?
Unfortunately, I can't remember an exact time, but it would have been around like dinner time. So if I had to guess, maybe like 6.
And as far as drinking was concerned with that night, you were at a bar and you weren't driving, correct?
Oh, yeah, no, I was not driving.
And do you recall specifically what kind of drinks you had or what you had to drink that night?
I believe that night I was drinking White Claw, I think.
And your boyfriend, Mr. Morris, as far as what, if anything, was going on with him that night, as far as how long was he at the water?
Yeah, so we were aware that it was likely going to snow that night. So my boyfriend Tristan had gotten offered to do some like plowing or shoveling. So he knew that he was going to have to probably be up for the majority of the night into the morning doing some shoveling. So he didn't stick around at the waterfall for too long. I think he had some food, maybe like 1 or 2 drinks, and then he actually ended up going home.
And you stayed at the waterfall after he went home?
I stayed there, yeah, with my mom and my Aunt Julie.
And if you recall, as far as that evening at the waterfall, what, if anything, was going on as far as like live entertainment?
I want to say that there might have been a band. I just don't want to say for sure, but I think I do recall a band coming in and setting up, and yeah, I think that there might have been one.
Now, as far as the evening progressed and went on, who, if anyone else, came into the waterfall and sort of joined your group when you were there?
Sure. So I can't say for sure like times of people arriving or order of people arriving, but I know at one point my uncle Chris Albert, he ended up joining us. He owns a pizza shop across the street, so when he was done working, he came and joined us. And then my aunt Jen McCabe and her husband Matt McCabe joined us. And then at some point, my father, Brian Albert, and his friend Brian Higgins also joined us. So at one point in time, I'm not sure the order of which, everybody came in or the time that they came in, but at some point we were all kind of there hanging out.
Now, and your father and Mr. Higgins, do you know where they had come from or where they were coming from?
Yes, I believe they were coming from New York from a funeral. And I remember I had asked my mom, like, is Dad going to stop by? And she was like, I don't know, he's tired. He's coming back from New York. And I was like, oh, I want to see him. So I think I convinced him to come. And then Brian Higgins just kind of tagged along from what I can remember.
Now, as far as Mr. Higgins was concerned, is that someone that you were familiar with prior to this evening of the 28th?
I knew of him and I had met him a couple times, but nothing more than that.
As far as you're aware, the house that you, for lack of a better term, grew up in or spent some formative years in, had Mr. Higgins ever been over to that house at 34 Fairview when you were there?
Not that I know of.
Now, at some point later in the evening, who, if anyone else, came and sort of came up to your group or joined you while you were at the wall?
So from what I can remember, I remember sitting at like a high top table, and it was me and my mom sitting next to each other, and we were facing like the front door of the waterfall. And I recall a man and a woman walking in, and at first I didn't know who either of them were, but I noticed that the man started talking to like some of my aunts and uncles that I was with, and he seemed friendly with the people that were in our group. So I had said to my mom, like, oh, who is that? And she said, oh, that's John O'Keefe. And I had known of him because I knew his story about his niece and his nephew and his family. So I had known of him, but had never met him before. And so then I just assumed that the woman that was with him was his significant other, girlfriend, wife. I didn't know. So then, I didn't really speak to either of them. I think at one point, John came up to me and my mom and asked, like, do you guys need anything? Do you need a drink? And we said no, and that was pretty much it.
And so when you say you knew of John O'Keefe and sort of the story as you related, do you recall how it was that you came to know anything about Mr. O'Keefe? Or who was it through that you came to know about Mr. O'Keefe?
Well, in general, it was kind of like a known thing, the tragedy of what happened in the O'Keefe family. And so I had just kind of heard that story. And then on top of that, John O'Keefe's niece is either the same age or around the same age as some of my younger cousins. So I knew that she was friendly with them. I knew that my Aunt Jen McCabe would like help out here and there, going to sports, going to different events, whatever. I know that my Aunt Jen was friendly with John O'Keefe. And I knew that my Aunt Julie and Uncle Chris were somewhat friends with him as well.
And just to be clear, when you're talking about some of your younger cousins, the younger cousins you're speaking of, who are the parents?
So the younger cousins that I'm referring to would be the McCabe girls, and their parents are Jen McCabe and Matt McCabe.
And they were present at the waterfall that evening as well?
Jen and Matt were, yes.
Now, with reference to Mr. O'Keefe and his significant other that you described, had you ever met them prior to that evening?
I had not, not to my knowledge. I wouldn't be surprised if there was maybe like a sporting event or something where we, met each other in passing, but I had never formally met John or the woman that he was with.
And so on that evening of January 28th, you had never met nor were you aware of anybody by the name of Karen?
No, I was not.
And if you know, about what time was it that they came into the waterfall and came over?
I can't say for sure. I'm not sure what time.
But fair to say, the other people that you testified about, as far as your uncles, your aunts, and things like that, were they all there at the time that Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed came in?
I believe so. I believe that everyone who was there in the group that I was with was present when John O'Keefe and Karen Reed arrived.
And about what time was it that things started to wind down as far as the waterfall was concerned?
Again, I'm the worst with times, but I would say it was around like 12-ish that we kind of said, let's kind of head out and head home. I would say 12-ish, approximately.
Now, during the course of the time that you were at the waterfall, either before or after Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed arrived, how would you describe sort of the mood or the demeanor of the group that you were with?
I mean, I didn't notice any issues or any negative things happening. All the conversations seemed positive, lighthearted. Everyone was just kind of having a good time, getting along. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, really.
So no issues as far as fighting or tension between your group, is that correct?
Correct.
And as far as you saw, with regards to Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed, no issues as far as fighting or tension that you observed between the two of them?
Not that I observed, no.
And when you, around 12-ish or so, when you started to leave, who was it that, how did you come to leave and who did you leave with? So
I left with my mom and my dad. And again, I'm not sure the order of when everybody else left, but I went with my mom and my dad back to 34 Fairview Road.
And if you recall, who drove home from the waterfall to 34 Fairview?
My dad.
And about how long a drive is that from the waterfall to Fairview Road?
I would say like 5 or 6 minutes, give or take.
And when you arrived to the house at 34 Fairview, do you recall where your father parked in relation to the house?
From what I can remember, he parked in the driveway. The driveway.
And if you know about how many other cars were in the driveway when you parked?
I'm not sure. I know there was at least like 1 or 2, but I can't say for sure. I just don't really remember how many were in the driveway at the time. I had like younger siblings in college at the time who would sometimes take some of the cars, so I just don't remember for sure.
And if you know, essentially, within the driveway, there's a garage at the end of the driveway, is that correct?
Yes.
And it's door on the left, door on the right, is that right?
Yes.
And do you recall whether or not your father pulled in the driveway on the left side or the right side in relation to those doors?
I don't remember.
And when you came into the house, do you remember how it was that you came from the vehicle to the house?
Yes. From what I remember, I went in the front door. So I would have gotten out and walked on the brick path over to the front door area, walked up the steps, and then walked through the door that enters into like a foyer area.
And just to be clear, sort of when you walk into that front door with the foyer area, what if anything's right in front?
So when I first walked in, I actually had seen my cousin Colin. He was standing in the foyer area. And I remember I said to him, like, oh, hi, what are you doing?
Next question. Not what you said to me.
Taking you back to sort of when you're exiting the waterfall and when you're exiting your parents' vehicle and walking into the house, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather at that time?
I remember at that point, snow was definitely coming down. And I could tell that it was like progressively getting worse.
And so you walk into the home in the front foyer area, that's where you run into your cousin Colin?
Yes.
How is Colin related to you as far as, how is he your cousin?
So Colin is Julie Albert and Chris Albert's son. So he's my first cousin.
And when you walk in, you sort of bump into him, where was it that he was?
He told me that he was headed,
Not what he told you. Where was he going?
to my knowledge, he was going home.
Next question. Next question.
From the time that you walked in and bumped into Colin sort of in the foyer of the home, how long was it that he was in the home while you were there?
I would say
So how long was he in the home when you were there?
minutes.
And from your group, this includes yourself, your mother, your father, is that correct?
Sorry, what was that?
From your group, when you enter the home, that includes you, your mother, and your father. Correct?
Yes.
And who, if anyone else in the waterfall, arrived at your home around the same time as yourself, your mother, and your father?
I believe that Brian Higgins was the next to arrive. I think he very shortly after came inside, after myself, my mom and dad.
And so when Mr. Higgins comes into the house at 34 Fairview, are you already in the house?
I was already inside, yes.
And so do you have any idea what Mr. Higgins was driving that evening or where he parked it?
I do not.
And then once you come into the house, when you come into the house, where is it within the home that you go?
So I walked in through the foyer, and then I took a right turn, which leads into like the dining room area. And that's where my brother Brian and two of his friends were just sitting around the dining room table. So I said happy birthday to him and was just kind of hanging out in there for a little bit.
And the friends that you observed in that sort of kitchen dining area, the friends of your brother Brian, little Brian, what were their names?
Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel.
And were those people that you were familiar with prior to this evening on January 28th?
Yes.
Familiar with them as the friends of your little brother?
Yes, exactly.
And with regard to the house, after yourself, your mother, and your father arrived, and then Mr. Higgins after that, who, if anyone else from the waterfall, came to the house with yourself?
My Aunt Jen and my Uncle Matt McCabe.
And when your Aunt Jen and your Uncle Matt McCabe arrived, where was Colin?
Colin had left by then.
Objection.
I'm going to allow.
And when Mr. and Mrs. or your uncle and your Aunt McCabe come in, where is it that they go with them?
I believe they did a similar thing. They either entered through the dining room or through the kitchen area, but the dining room and the kitchen are like open floor, kind of all the same room. So we were just all kind of hanging out in that area.
And if you know about how long a period of time were you at your parents' house on Fairview Road that evening?
I would say hour 45, latest 2 hours, but around like an hour and a half, an hour 45. But yeah, I can't say for sure. It's an estimate.
And for the balance of the time that you were there, were you in that same sort of kitchen dining room area?
Yes.
And what is it that you were doing as far as you and the group doing in that area?
We were just kind of hanging out. I remember that my mom had grabbed like a small speaker and put some music on. We had a couple drinks and everyone was just kind of like having a good time, hanging out. We said happy birthday to Brian, and that was kind of it.
And Ms. Albert, at any point in time when you were let me ask you this first. As far as the sort of demeanor or mood within the house, similar to how I would ask you with the waterfall, did any of that change once you returned back to your parents' house at Fairview Road?
No.
So everyone getting along, no arguments, no tension, anything you observed?
Correct, yeah.
Now, beyond the people that you just described, did anyone else come into your house, into your parents' house that evening while you were there?
No.
And specifically, Mr. O'Keefe and/or his significant other, Ms. Reed, at any point in time while you were there, did they come into your house?
No, neither of them ever came into the home.
Now, with regard to the people that you were describing before, at any point in time, did the people in the kitchen dining room area, any of them leave that area of the house?
I think when my mom, my dad, and I first got there, I believe my dad went upstairs to grab the dog to let her out. So he did that, and then I think there was another period of time where my dad might have been showing, or maybe my mom or my dad were showing Brian Higgins like family photos of one of my brothers who's in the Marines. And that would have been in like the family room area, which still is like there's an open doorway, so it's not like the door was shut or anything. But other than that, we all kind of stayed within that dining room kitchen vicinity.
Now, with reference to the dog, that was a family dog, is that right?
Yes.
And your family had the dog when you still lived on Fairview Road with your parents?
Yes.
And what was the dog's name?
Chloe.
And with respect to letting the dog out, can you describe to the jury sort of what that process entailed? Was it on a leash, or how would the dog be let out?
Sure. So we had like a fenced-in backyard, and we had a back door. So we would just kind of open the back door, let her out. She would kind of do her thing, and then she would come back in when she was done.
And your father took care of that when you got home from the waterfall that evening?
Yes.
In the family room that you were talking about, where your father and or your mother and Mr. Higgins were, as far as the photographs, where is that in relation to the dining room kitchen area, and specifically, can you see into that area from the dining room kitchen?
Into the family room? Yes. So there's just sort of like it's like a doorway, but there's no door there. It's pretty open. And if you're standing in the dining room or the kitchen, you can see into the family room for the most part.
Now, you at that point were not living at the address on Fairview Road, is that right?
Correct.
And as far as the people that were at the house who did not live at the Fairview home on that night, who was the last person to leave?
I was the last person to leave.
And prior to your departure from the house, sometime hour 45 or so after you got there, can you describe the order in which the other people that you just described were there? What order did those in?
I don't remember the order in which everybody left, but I do remember that Sarah Levinson, Julie Nagel, my Aunt Jen, and my Uncle Matt, they all left in one car, and then Brian Higgins left. But I just don't remember the order in which it was probably within like a couple minutes of each other, but I just don't remember exactly who left first. And then I left pretty shortly after everyone else as well.
Now, during the time that you were hanging out in that dining room kitchen area of the home, at any point in time was your attention drawn to the outside of the house? Did you hear anything, see anything outside the house?
I did not.
And with respect to the front area of the house, at any point in time, was there any discussion that you recall about anything going on there?
I don't recall a discussion going on about anything happening out front, except for at one point,
No, let me hear her answer first. Except for what, at one point?
I remember that Julie Nagel's brother was supposed to pick her up. So I knew that there was some communication where she told him, never mind, you don't need to pick me up. You can go home. I'm going to go home with Jen and Matt.
Now, with respect to your aunt, Jennifer McKay, what, if anything, do you recall her doing with, do you recall her having a cell phone that night?
I do.
And what, if anything, do you recall her doing with respect to that cell phone?
I remember at one point we were standing in the kitchen and I had noticed she was on the phone. And I remember she said something to the effect of like, oh,
No, not what she said.
okay,
So next question, Steve.
At some point, did you see her talking on the phone?
I did.
And at some point, did you see her appear to be texting on the phone?
I'm not sure about texting. I definitely saw her speaking with somebody on the phone though.
And at some point, where did she put her phone in relation to where you guys were in the kitchen and dining room?
I'm not sure.
Recall any sort of charger or anything like that in that area of the home?
I don't.
Now, as far as who picked you up from the house that night?
My boyfriend.
And Mrs. Morris came to the house in Fairview Road and picked you up at some point, about an hour and 45 minutes or so after you arrived there, is that correct?
Yes.
And recall what Ms. Morris was driving on that particular evening?
I remember that he actually was driving my car, which is a 2019 white Jeep Cherokee.
And what kind of car did Ms. Morris have at that time, if you recall?
At that time, he had a very old, I want to say like 2012 Ford Taurus. So that's why he took my car, because the Taurus wouldn't have been good in the snow.
And how was it that you came? Did he call you, text you? How did you know that he was there?
I believe that we texted, and that's how I was informed that he was out front.
So you receive a text, something to the effect of here, and then you go outside?
Yes.
And when you went outside, if you recall, what was the weather like when you were coming out of the house?
When I walked outside, I remember, again, the snow was coming down a lot. I remember like sort of trying to watch my step because the stairs in the brick path were pretty snowy, and I didn't want to slip. So as far as weather, I remember it was actively snowing and I was trying not to slip. And that's pretty much what I can remember.
And do you recall where it was that your boyfriend, Mr. Morris, parked the car in relation to the house when he arrived?
I believe he parked in the driveway.
So you would have come down the steps, down the walkway to the driveway area, correct?
Yes.
And who drove from Fairview Road to back home that evening?
Tristan did.
Now, if you recall, when Ms. Morris, I'm assuming, backs out of the driveway, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
When he backs out of the driveway, where does the vehicle go in relation to the house?
We went up Fairview Road, so towards the flagpole in our yard.
And so towards the flagpole with the passenger side facing the house, is that right?
Yes.
And if you recall, as Mr. Morris is driving away from the home, what, if anything, with respect to the weather, did he have to employ within the car?
I remember the windshield wipers were on, and I remember he was driving very cautiously, 10 and 2. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, the snow is coming down pretty hard.
And as you drove past the house, were you looking outside or looking at the house or the front lawn area of the home?
I was not. Once I got inside the car, I was mainly, my attention was on him, and we were having a conversation, so I hadn't been looking out the passenger window towards my house at really any point.
So your head was turned towards your boyfriend who's driving the car to the left of you as he's driving away from home?
Yes.
I have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Yannetti?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
So, Ms. Albert, you were at your parents' home on January 29th by midnight, or shortly thereafter, correct?
Correct.
And you were the last one to leave at 1:45, 2 o'clock, somewhere in that area?
Yes.
On January 29th of 2022, after you got up that day, did you receive a call, a text, any sort of communication from any investigator connected with this case?
I did not.
Trooper Proctor did not contact you on January 29th?
No.
He did not interview you on January 29th?
He did not.
What about January 30th?
No.
31st?
Nope.
How about the entire month of February? Did you hear from Trooper Proctor wherein he set up a meeting or an interview with you?
I did not.
Then what about the entire rest of 2022?
Objection,
Trooper
Your Honor.
Proctor interviewed you during that entire year?
All right, so the objection's overruled. You can answer that.
Okay. I was not interviewed, no.
No. And then in 2023, prior to May of 2023, were you contacted by Trooper Proctor or any investigator for an interview regarding what you just testified to here today?
I don't think so.
And you haven't met Mr. Lally by May of 2023 either, correct?
I don't think so.
But in May of 2023, you actually were called to testify at another hearing where neither the Commonwealth or the defense in this case was present, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Lally and Ms. McLaughlin were not there, and certainly no members of the defense team were there, correct?
Correct.
And May of 2023 was well over a year after the events that you were called to testify about, correct?
Correct.
Right? So if these events happened on January 28th and 29th, 2022, the end of January of 2023 would have been a year. Now, you're being asked for the first time to give testimony about what happened back in January of 2022 in May of 2023, correct?
Yes.
And then it was only after you testified before that other proceeding, without the prosecution and the defense of this case there, that Trooper Proctor finally interviewed you in August of 2023, correct?
That's correct.
And that was 4 months after you testified in that other hearing of May of 2023, correct? 3 months. June, July, August, correct?
Correct.
And it was about a year and a half after January 29th of 2022, correct?
I believe so.
All right. Now, on direct examination, Mr. Lally had asked you about whether you knew Brian Higgins. Do you remember that line of questioning?
I do.
And I believe you testified that you knew of Higgins, correct?
Yes.
And you thought that you had met him a couple of times, correct?
Yes.
So Brian Higgins, you would classify as an acquaintance, correct?
To me,
Yes.
I would classify him as a friend of my father's, not really an acquaintance or friend of mine.
Okay. So he didn't rise to the level of an acquaintance, somebody who you met, but you didn't really know.
I'm not really sure how I would categorize my relationship with him. Again, it was just more of like, he was my father's friend. If I had seen him walking down the street, I would have said hello to him. I don't know anything about his personal life. I don't communicate with him regularly. So, I mean, if that's what you would consider an acquaintance, then yes.
I guess I would ask, what do you consider an acquaintance? How would you define that term?
I would say an acquaintance is someone who you are friendly with and might see from time to time. I guess in my head, I'm just sort of thinking someone who's in closer in age with me. I usually think of it as more of like a friend type thing and not my father's friend to me. I guess that's just the way I think of it in my head.
Okay, so is your testimony before this jury that an acquaintance is really a friend?
Someone that you're friendly with, perhaps. Could be.
Okay. Have you watched any of the testimony in this case prior to your taking the stand today?
I have not.
Has anybody told you anything about any of the testimony that has occurred prior to your taking the stand today?
No.
Okay. Who is Katie McLaughlin?
Katie McLaughlin is a girl who I'm the same age as. We went to high school together. We graduated the same year, and we have a couple mutual friends. We interact with some of the same people socially. I can't think of a time, possibly ever, where her and I ever hung out one-on-one or individually. So more of like a friend of a mutual friend.
Okay. So, Kate, you would not consider Katie McLaughlin to be a friend?
She's not a close personal friend of
I
mine.
asked you if she was a close personal friend.
Objection.
Just let her finish her answer.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your answer.
I would not consider her one of my, again, close friends.
Okay, all right. So let's get back to my question. Would you consider her to be a friend?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay, Ms. Albert, you know Courtney Proctor, correct?
I know of her, yes.
And you've been in her company several times, correct?
Yes.
You've met her children, correct?
Once, yes.
And you know she is Michael Proctor's sister, correct?
Yes.
When Michael Proctor ultimately interviewed you in August of 2023, did he ever ask you how well you knew his sister, Courtney Proctor? Did that subject ever come up?
Not that I remember.
And did you ever mention it to him that you had met his sister and met his sister's kids?
I did not.
Now, on January 28th of 2022, you went to the waterfall with your boyfriend, Tristan Morris, correct?
Yes.
And ultimately, he left and you stayed, correct?
Yes.
The reason that you stayed is you wanted to go back to 34 Fairview, your old home, to be there by midnight when your brother was turning 23, correct?
Not necessarily. My plan was always to stay and just spend some time with my mom and my aunt. But Tristan left very early because he knew that he was going to have to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning shoveling or plowing. So my plan was never to go back with him. But it wasn't necessarily because it was my brother's birthday. It was just what my plan was for the night.
Certainly the fact that it was your brother's birthday didn't deter you from going back, right? In other words, the fact that it was your brother's birthday didn't cause you to hesitate to go back. You wanted to be there, right?
Well, my brother Brian wasn't at the waterfall.
No, I'm talking about, let's start over. Tristan left, right?
Yes.
You stayed at the waterfall,
Yes.
and you planned to go back to 34 Fairview, did you not?
At some point in time, that was spoken about, and I agreed to go back to 34 Fairview, yes.
Okay. And you went back there to see your family, correct?
Yes.
Including your brother Brian, whose birthday it was, correct?
Yes.
That was your parents' home, right?
Yes.
You grew up there.
Yes.
You were comfortable there.
Yes.
There was plenty of room at the house, correct?
In what sense?
A bunch of bedrooms.
Yes.
Not all of them were taken up, correct?
At that time, correct.
You certainly felt welcome there, correct?
Yes.
And there was no problem with you staying there overnight, correct?
Correct.
And when you made the decision to go there after the waterfall, you knew that there was a snowstorm that was starting, correct?
Yes.
And you've already testified that when you went back to 34 Fairview, you saw your cousin Colin Albert inside the home, correct?
Yes.
In fact, you walked in and he was one of the first people that you saw, correct?
Correct.
He's been over your house many times, correct?
Correct.
You're close with him as your first cousin, are you not?
I am.
And your brother Brian Jr. is close with him as well, correct?
Yes.
Colin Albert is close with your parents, correct?
Yes.
He's certainly welcome at your parents' home, correct?
Correct.
And it was certainly not shocking to see your first cousin Colin Albert at your home, correct?
Correct.
And you had a brief interaction with him, correct?
Yes.
That was sort of toward the foyer of the house?
Yes.
And then you continued deeper into your parents' home and you saw other people there, correct?
Yes.
Where did you go within the home after you had seen Colin?
I believe I entered through the foyer into the dining room area.
And when you were there, you saw your brother Brian, whose birthday it was, correct?
Yes.
He had two friends with him, Julie Nagel and Sarah Levinson, in that same area?
Yes.
You greeted them as well?
Yes.
And that's where your attention was focused, fair to say?
I would say that once I said hello to them, I didn't just sit with them three. I sort of was walking around. I wouldn't say my attention was solely focused on them three, but I did greet them, yes.
And where you were walking around within the kitchen dining room area?
Yes.
And once you greeted Colin and left him, it's fair to say that you then were not looking over your shoulder monitoring what Colin was doing or where he was going, correct?
Correct.
And while you were in the kitchen dining room area, the door to the basement was kind of blocked from your view, was it not?
If I'm in the dining room area, there is a spot in there where I could see it, but I don't believe I could see the basement door, no.
Right. And from your vantage point, the door to the basement's kind of blocked from the area that you were in.
For the most part, yes.
And you weren't watching Colin to see where he went after you left him, correct?
Correct.
And you never saw him leave the house physically, correct?
Correct.
This may be a good time to pause. I don't know, are we going past 4?
All right, we'll pause then, thank you. All right, Ms. Albert, we'll bring you back tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to stay here and just look at the service file out first.